Hello everybody, this is Fun Police and we are back for part 3 of the Legion card review. This time we're going to be taking a look at the Soviet cards and seeing what they bring to the table. But as with the previous two videos, we're going to open our third and final officer pack. And let's see what we get. Limited, special, limited. So sadly no elites, which is a bit disappointing. Some of these are nice cards, and some of them we're actually going to talk about in a minute, but still no elite, so that was a bit of a shame. And that is all the packs I have for now. The rest of my pre-order will arrive with the expansion on the 31st. But, regardless, let's get into the Soviet cards. So, let's start off with Red Dawn. It is a 1-credit order that has the text, choose one, deal 3 damage to a unit and your HQ, or add From the People to your hand. Just to jog your memory, From the People is 3 credits, deal 3 damage to a unit. I think this is a very interesting card. You can either use it as a super cheap order to deal 3 damage to something, but you take 3 on your own HQ, or you can use it as a slightly more expensive From the People. I think this flexibility of being able to take damage or not take damage is a big benefit to it, and I think overall helps it, I think, be a reasonable card. For example, in a self-damaging deck, I could see this being run. If you don't have any other self-damage, Red Dawn can be very strong early game removal, and later on, when you've played other self-damage cards, you can simply use the other mode and get the From the People to not take any damage. There's also some benefit to be had in decks like a British Commando deck, as Red Dawn can practically be 2 orders in 1, so there is a little bit of that there. But I think that this is a very reasonable card, and that a wide variety of slower Soviet decks will actually be interested in this. Next up, we have Road to Berlin. It is a 1-credit order, and it is an elite, and it says the enemy HQ gets, if this HQ has taken 3+ damage this turn, give your HQ 3 defense. This seems to be a really big card for Soviet self-damage. The Soviet self-damage archetype has had the largest weakness of not being able to heal without specific ally nations or a small handful of cards within the Soviets. Road to Berlin allows you to be aggressive and then heal off that damage. It being 1 credit means that it is very easy to get down, and I think overall this is actually a really strong card. Continuous healing, I think there's a lot going for this card. Slower Soviet decks will enjoy this for just the extra healing it can provide, as they often are able to deal damage with a variety of like Blitz T34s or just big units in general. You know, and then, for example, Tokens. Tokens has a strong incentive to use this and benefit from it, as they also are attacking. And in general, just to be honest, in general, the Soviets just have a lot of times where they're just attacking the enemy HQ, and getting 3 defense on top of that for just 1 credit, you know, every time is quite worth it. So I think this is actually quite the strong card, and I think is going to be pretty widely seen in a lot of different Soviet decks. But I think definitely its strongest place is in a self-damage deck, where you're able to apply pressure quickly and then apply pressure by taking that damage, but then recovering that with this card. You know, for example, it can offset Red Dawn's downside. So you can use Red Dawn early on, and then Road to Berlin will just heal you back. Could be quite a powerful combination. Next up, the 2nd Marines Battalion. The 2nd Marines Battalion is a 2-credit, 0 operation cost infantry. It is a 2/4. It has Blitz, and it has the text, combat damage dealt to this unit is doubled. I really like this card. Most notably, I think that this is a really strong aggro card against the unitless control decks. Decks that are not looking to engage in fights with the units are going to really struggle to remove this unit, which can very quickly get out of hand. However, if you are playing units, this is essentially like a 2-credit 2/2. So I think it balances out quite nicely to being a card that I think we'll see in more aggressive Soviet lists, and I think can also just be a very strong card to punish people if they try to skimp out on units. I really like this card, and I think that, in particular, tokens and other aggressive Soviet lists will probably be running this. I don't think slower Soviet lists will be as interested, as often those decks have a lot of tools to punish other slow decks, but they really don't have... And against aggro, this card is not that impressive. So I think a very cool not a tech card, but a very interesting card that, can be especially punishing if a player, or if the meta is very much trying to ignore the board too much. Next up is Deep Operation. It is a 2-credit limited order, and it has the text, add 2 light infantry to your hand, then give all such units in hand blitz. This is, I think, a massive card. Giving light infantry blitz is incredibly powerful, and is just kind of like super scary. We haven't seen tokens in the meta for a little while now. The meta got quite hostile towards it with a lot of cheap blitz and aggro decks, but a lot of cheap AoE and aggro decks. But being able to play out a bunch of light infantry and immediately push them into the front line gives tokens the unique ability to threaten people in a way that they have never been able to do before. Even if you're just pushing 2 or 3 light infantry into the front line, that is very strong, because those units will immediately threaten the enemy with big buffs such as Unity is Strength and the various other Soviet buffs to them. I think that for Deep Operation, this is going to be a standout card, and I think is really going to help tokens a lot. It's not hard to do Reserves Deep Operation and then have, 6 Blitz light infantry in your hand in the mid game, and that's just a lot of it gives them a refill that is able to immediately pressure the enemy, rather than taking turns off to refill their support line and then moving them into the front line to actually threaten. So I think Deep Operation is actually kind of insane, but we'll see if this is enough to bring tokens back into the meta. I remain optimistic, because I just think this card is really, really strong, but we'll have to see, because there is always the bane of tokens, which are like Fast Hinds, which has high health but low, cheap high health tanks that can really punish the slower starts of tokens. So we'll see. The deck has never been bad. Tokens has won tournaments just a little bit ago, but it's just, we'll see. I guess we'll see. It's very hard to judge this, and sadly I don't play tokens a lot, so my opinion may be a bit off, but to me this seems like a big buff to the card, or to the deck as a whole. Moving on from that card, we have Promotion. Promotion is a 3-credit order that says draw a random unit from your deck. It gets +2/+2 when it is deployed. I like this card a lot. +2/+2 on a unit is quite a decent little buff, and because this is always drawing a unit, you could even kind of see this as a tutor, being able to draw specific cards, and then buffing them up. With guards, this has the potential to make guards very, very powerful. If we just take and I think about it, East Surrey Regiment with this goes from a 2/6 to a 4/8. Or if you want to stay in the Soviets, stuff like the armored train becomes a 5/9 with heavy armor summoning light infantry. Or the KV-1 becomes a 6/8 with heavy armor and guard. And I think that is very powerful. Even units that, it also can buff artillery up, it can buff bombers, and I think this has a strong potential in a variety of decks. Most notably, I think a couple copies in value could be quite strong, giving you stronger mid-game turns. If the game starts out slow, those bigger units will be able to better pressure in the mid-game. I think this card, if you build it right, could also be like a fun meme deck, With the next card we're talking about, the 125th, there's the potential for a deck that runs only a couple units, promotion, and then looks to abuse the fact that they always will have those units in their hand by tutoring them up. That isn't a good application of the card, but it is something to at least have fun with. But otherwise, promotion is quite a fun, or quite a powerful card, I think. However, Soviet value is kind of cluttered at the moment. There is a lot going into the deck, and there is also a lot that is already in the deck. So I guess we'll see if it makes it in. But I think it has enough merits that a copy or two could find their way into it, especially if you want to build like a Soviet value list that is maybe a bit more defensive, as this works essentially well on stuff like guards or cards that heal you. Like I'm thinking, like the... Let me pull it up. The 2-credit infantry, 845th rifles. This being a 4/5, that's significantly harder to deal with. Or if we want to go to like Italy, the Fiat G50 would be a 4/5, healing for 4 every attack. Quite a powerful effect. So I think that is going to be interesting. Next up, we have the 125th Rifle Regiment. It is a 4-credit, 1 operation cost infantry. It is a special. It has 3 attack, 4 health, has guard, and then the text, when the enemy draws a card, deal 1 damage to the enemy HQ. This is essentially a mini version of the Elite KV-1 1941. The Elite KV-1 deals 2 every time the enemy draws, so you're dealing half the damage, but you get 2 copies of it, and you can run it alongside the KV-1. That is potentially a lot of damage and can be very punishing, as players will have to spend resources several times in order to make 125th, or in order to remove 125th before they go to draw cards. It also has guards, so it has a nice benefit against slower decks, or against aggressive decks, my apologies. It will essentially be able to pull double duty, punishing slow decks, but also keeping you alive a little bit against aggro decks. It's not the greatest body, but it's better than nothing. I think this is potentially a very solid card for certain forms of Soviet value. Namely, I think maybe more aggressive versions that are looking to more actively attack and punish and kill people. They would benefit a lot from having more effects that can passively burn the enemy down. So I guess we'll see where this ends up, but I think Soviet value makes the most sense. But maybe there are other Soviet decks, We do see the KV-1, the Elite KV-1 in a variety of lists, even the more aggressive list as a top-end burn finisher, so maybe the 125th is good enough to fit in there also. I guess we'll just have to wait and see on it, but it's definitely a pretty good card. Next up, the 152mm howitzer gun. It is a 4-credit, 2 operation cost artillery piece. It has 3 attack, 3 health, and has destruction, deal 1 damage to all. So it essentially is a 3/3 artillery that has a winter warfare when it dies. This is an interesting card. It is seemingly meant to fit into a self-damage archetype. But there's a lot going on with this card. Most notably, 3/3 artillery is... I think this is the first time we've seen a 4-credit artillery with a 3/3 stat line and no downside, really. Let me check on that. Yes, I think so. The only other one is the Type 4 Horo. But yeah, so this is one of the biggest 4-credit artillery pieces we've seen in the game, which is interesting. And then the self-damage effect. This is potentially a board clear on enemy units. That is potentially quite the powerful effect. You can play this out and kill it, and then the enemy, has their weakened units damaged off. Or it sets up something like counteroffensive, and if the enemy doesn't respond to it, then you have a 3/3 artillery piece to make use of. So it's a really weird card. I don't know how to judge it. I think I'm going to say it is on the weaker side of cards, simply because it's slow, and there's not a lot of slow decks that can really benefit from this. But maybe it has enough interesting stuff going on to maybe fit into like a self-damage deck. You know, it's a decent threat that also can have you get some extra winter warfares going, and also can just, you know, do kind of everything you want to do in those decks. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I think it probably falls a little short, but it's really interesting. Like, this is a weird design, so I know I'm going to at least try it out. Next up, probably one of the most exciting cards from the Soviets, the 214th Amur. The 214th Amur is a 4-credit, 2 operation cost infantry. It has 3 attack, 6 health, and it has the text, your T34 units have +1 heavy armor and operate for 1 less. So this is quite the big card, and is the T34 Tribal card. It is well statted, and the effects it gives to the T34s are highly relevant. Operating for less is a huge thing for the Soviet T34s, as stuff like the T34s mostly deal in high operation costs. Having 2 operation costs on like the 1942 version or the T34-85 or even the OT-34, which is a T-34, mind you, and does benefit from this. So being those operating for 1 less, on top of that, adding that heavy armor makes them even more durable. In particular, stuff like the T-34-85, which has heavy armor already, gets heavy armor too. That is really strong, and could potentially can be super annoying to deal with. And that's not even to mention that the 214th Amur can stack, meaning that that if you get multiple of these down, your T-34s will be operating for free and often have heavy armor 3. That's kind of crazy. I think this is potentially a massive enabler for the deck, although we'll have to see if a deck is able to fit in enough T-34s and make it a win condition, because there is a lot of ways to make T-34s, but I guess we'll have to see if people can find a good amount of them to run alongside the Amur, and if that is strong enough to outpace slower value decks. I'm very excited for it, though. This is one of my favorite cards of the expansion. Following on from that, we have the IL-2M Poland. It is a 4-credit, 2 operation cost. It is a 3/3 bomber, and it has a exile, so it is a Soviet exile, but it is a Polish card also. It has heavy armor 1, and it has the text, when a friendly unit with heavy armor survives combat, give it +1/+1. So this is, and just to remind everybody, combat is between unit to unit. It doesn't matter if damage is dealt, but it cannot be attacking HQs, essentially. So this IL-2 is able to grow itself due to its own heavy armor, and also seems to be fitting in with something like the 214th Amur, as you buff up your T-34s with heavy armor, and then as they're fighting, the IL-2 can help you buff them up further, making it bigger and bigger. But that is a lot of expensive cards. But there is also another idea, and that is with the 1-credit Men of Steel, which gives all of your units +1 heavy armor. That is potentially an interesting design that can give you quite the powerful board to buff, as all your units will be growing as long as the IL-2 remains out. However, the IL-2 will have to survive, and it is not the biggest of bodies when it starts out. 3 health is not exactly a lot, and especially on a bomber, but it does grow, so if you can't kill this in 1 attack, it actually is almost like a heavy armor 2 bomber, which is quite tough for units. But I think it being so weak to orders is probably its biggest thing, and it's also expensive, so I don't think that a heavy armor themed deck will exist right now. I think the greatest chance it has is probably in some sort of T34 deck, but I don't know if that is going to really work out, because now we're talking about running all the T34s, all the 2/14 amurs, and then also running the IL2s. That's a lot of 4 and 5 credit cards that we're talking about, you know? And they all have to come down, and they all have to be working together, and I don't know, it seems like too much work. I think it's a cool card, just probably a little bit too much work. It needs a little bit more... It needs more independent heavy armor units. If we can see some cheap heavy armor units, I think the IL2 gets a lot more interesting. But for now, The T34 76 Poland is our next card. 4 credits for a 2 operation cost tank. It is a 4/4, and it has Exile, Blitz, and Heavy Armor 1. This is a very standard card, but works incredibly well alongside Amur. Not only is it cheaper than most other T34s, it also will get Heavy Armor 2, which makes it actually quite powerful in conjunction with it, with the Amur. I think that in the T34 Tribal, this will be one of the main cards for it. It also is an exile card for Poland with the Soviets. But in talking of the Soviets, I think this is largely a T34 Tribal card. But I also can see some reasoning for a... even maybe on a budget, it could be a good card. As we've seen, it's very similar to other 4-credit Blitz tanks, namely the Panzer 3J, which is just a 4/5 Blitz for 4. This trades 1 health for heavy armor, but I think that works out quite well, and I think this is a strong card in T34. Again, it's hard to say if we are going to see that deck come to an actual meta tier, just because it seems kind of heavy, and maybe might end up a little bit too weak against fast decks. But this is a lot of power. Like, there's definitely like all this heavy armor flying around, and on Blitz units operating for cheaper. It could be really annoying to deal with. So I guess we'll see how it turns out. Next up, the 461st Rifles. It is a 5-credit, 1 operation cost infantry. It is a 5/3 with ambush, and it has the text, when this unit is dealt damage, your HQ gets equal amount of defense. So this is essentially the same thing as the 845th Rifles, which is the 2-credit 2/3 that we actually looked at before. This is the same text, but it's just more expensive for more attack alongside the ambush. Sadly, I don't think this card is very good. At 5 credits, it's slow, it's quite weak to orders. I know you get a little bit of healing from it, but it just seems overall pretty average. I think this is more of a draft card than anything. I guess if you really wanted to heal, like you really wanted extra healing in the Soviets, it's an option, but I would just run like 845th and then use your ally to get some extra healing. Because this is really slow and inconsistent. I guess there is synergy with promotion. You make it a 7/5 ambush, and then when the enemy like hammers it, you gain 6 health, but that seems inconsistent and just like too much work. It seems like I think it's mostly a draft card. It's good in draft though. Ambush alongside some healing. I think that's quite useful. So, it's a whatever card. 5-year plan. 5-year plan is a 5-credit order. It has the text, draw 5 cards, your HQ takes 5 damage. Whew, alrighty. So, this is really big draw. And I think that this could honestly enable a lot of Soviet archetypes. Up until now, the Soviets have not had the best of draw. Mostly relying on their allies to give them draw, and then supplementing it with a little bit of Bloody Sickle and occasionally 1 or 2 other things. But now they have 5 credits, draw 5, which is arguably the strongest draw order outside of like Enigma and maybe 1 other I'm forgetting. I think this draw could honestly rival Supply Chain in terms of its efficiency. It's potentially that strong. The big thing is that this is just like a card. Like, unlike Supply Chain, where you have to play a specific ally nation alongside, like, you have to play a specific ally combination alongside running a specific combo of cards. This is just a single card that draws you 5, but you take 5. I think aggressive decks are going to benefit a lot from this, just having a mid-game refill, because aggro decks often don't care about their life totals. I don't think you run this in self-damage. It's too much damage on its own. But if this is like your only damage card outside of maybe Bloody Sickles, I could see using a copy to try to win the game as an aggressive deck. I think this is potentially very powerful and could really enable like aggressive Soviet lists. Or maybe it could also be very strong in a Soviet control list, you know, because slower Soviet decks can run healing to offset the damage, at which point this is just like one of the best draw orders in the game. So I guess we'll see, but this is potentially a very big card, and I would honestly be kind of surprised if it doesn't find a home somewhere. Going on to the second to last card, the Partisans. It is a 6-credit order that says, take control of an enemy unit at the end of turn, send it to owner's hand. So being able to steal stuff has shown to be quite effective, mostly with the confusion order seen from last time. Partisans allows you to take any unit, though, which is potentially strong. I have talked about this card before, and I'm going to mainly restate my thoughts from there. It is essentially, I think, a value card, and it will exist and compete alongside a handful of other cards, such as, where is it? Siberian Transfer. There it is. Siberian Transfer, which spawns a T34 to use, or alongside something like the 6 Airborne, which spawns a T34. Partisans, I think, costs a similar amount if you use the unit, because the main thing you're doing with Partisans is you're going to be comboing it with Ural Red Banner or Ural Factories in order to get access to your own effects, or to keep the unit. And the ideal thing with Partisans is that you take the unit for 6 credits, then you attack with it, you know, which can cost some amount, and then you banner or Ural it and steal it permanently. And I think that competes very closely with doing something like 6 Airborne, moving and attacking with the T34, and then bannering it. So I think the cards are actually kind of close to that. And I think Partisans is a bit more meta-dependent, as Partisans can either be better than it, like if there's a lot of ramp, stealing that B-17 and getting a Pershing, that is quite strong. But if you're just playing against like aggro, Partisans isn't as, I'd say, as effective as like Siberian Transfer and whatnot. So really good card, but I don't know if it's always if it's an auto include in Soviet value. I think it's more of an option if the meta is favorable. And then the final card for the Soviets, the 272nd Guards. It is a 9-credit, 2 operation cost infantry. It is a 7/7 guard, and it has destruction at an Iosif Stalin 2 to your support line. Note, it says support line, not hand, so this puts out an 8/8 heavy armor 2 tank into your support line after it dies, and because it has guard, the enemy is going to be forced to attack into it. Also of note, it is a 9-credit card, so if you combine this with Ural Factories, you get 2 IS-2s on the board at the same time. This card seems kind of insane. We will see how much power this guy has, but that just the idea that on turn 10 you have 2 IS-2s on the board is really strong and hard to deal with outside of a handful of cards. So I think in value decks, this kind of becomes an auto-include as one of the premier top-end cards of that deck, because you can't even really deal, unless you're able to kill the 7/7 and then immediately deal with the IS-2, you're not going to want to kill this. And because it has guard, that means you may not be attacking the HQ. So there's potentially a lot of power here. I think this card's really good, and I expect this to pretty much just kind of become an auto-include in Soviet value. I'd even say it's reasonable that this may need to be nerfed to like 10 credits itself, so at least you can't get the double IS-2 out. But that remains to be seen. Regardless, that is all of the cards for the Soviets. Overall, I think we got a variety of cards. One of the standout ones, I think, is the T34 Tribal. That is something we've never seen before, and I think is very interesting. But I think also Road to Berlin is a standout card that is going to see play in a lot of deck lists. We got a variety of self-damage cards like Red Dawn and the 152 Howitzer, and even kind of 5-year plan. We got some aggressive tools with Deep Operation and 2nd Marine Battalion. And then we got a lot of value stuff. Promotion, 125th Rifle Regiment, 272nd Guards, Partisans. Soviet value may still struggle with the research aspect, but this is a lot of good stuff. And maybe there is a T34, like a value deck, that uses T34s to kill people before research ends up mattering. It remains to be seen, but I'm excited. There's a lot I want to try out in the Soviets, and we'll see where they end up after the full deck game, or the full set releases. But anyway, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. I know there's a lot of these videos coming out. Next time, we're going to cover the U.S. cards. We're about halfway done. We got one more for the U.S., which is next, Japan, and then the minor nations, including Poland, which is what I'm the most excited for. We will see, but for now, that is all. Thank you so much. If you enjoy this content, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me. I'm still pretty new to this, but I'm going to continue the starter series after this entire review season is over, and I also plan on start messing around with decks and just uploading gameplay footage of my variety decks and deck techs. So if you want to keep up to date with stuff like that, make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much, and have a good day.